Hey, what is up? This is AJ from Fire from Heaven. Me doing another video series talking about the story behind the song. In this case, we're doing my latest song released a couple weeks ago called A State of Siege, Stuck in a State of Siege, I think is actually what it was called. That's what ended up being the final name, I think. But anyway, I'm just gonna go through the lyrics and share a bit about it. So, go through this line by line. Suffocate, indoctrinate, intoxicate, stuck in a state of siege. So that first line is kind of like setting the mood for the story in this world that it takes place in, because I am the metal myth maker, right? So I write heavy metal and myth. So there's going to be a book alongside this metal album, and this is setting the stage for the story and what the character is feeling in the story at this point. So this is, kind of him describing his sort of his life, like his upbringing and, the world he lives in, So this is how he feels. He feels suffocated, he feels indoctrinated and intoxicated. And to essentially describe this, it feels like he's stuck in a state of siege, which state of siege is like a battle term, like in, for example, like ancient history or whatever. A lot of cities were walled cities, and there were a lot of times like city kingdoms, or it'd be like warring against the city's capital or whatever, but usually they were like city kingdoms, and they're walled. And the purpose of this was obviously to protect its inhabitants, because during that time there was a lot of warring between different peoples and different cities and different kingdoms, stuff like that. And you never knew when someone was going to try and attack and raid your village, if your town or city or whatever, for means of conquest, or to raid and take everything, including people as slaves and everything. A lot of different things, a lot of different reasons. But many times, if they couldn't get inside, they would besiege the city, cut off all communication, all supplies and everything, cut everything off from the city, basically starve them to the point where they basically all died, or they could just till they could find a way in or whatever. So it's basically like where you're just trapped in your own home, and you're basically starving and dying, basically. And that's basically like the character describing his state of mind, stuck in a state of siege. It feels like he's under siege, like he's stuck in himself in a way, and he's on all sides he's beset by enemies. So that's describing his state. And then kind of goes further: stuck in a state of siege, fabrications of free imprisoning, a cage of fallacies within and without me. So I don't really need to explain the stuck in the state of siege again, because I already did that. But the next line, fabrications of free imprisoning, it's basically, that means is in this world, in the fantasy world, but also this is sort of like allegorical to what I see in the world. Trying to think of the best way to put this. Fabrications of free imprisoning, like fabrications, like fabricated, something that's made up. And it sounds contradictory to say free imprisoning, but it's like, I like to do that a lot, just to show, not to show, but to, what's the word I'm trying to think of here? I usually put two words together that basically mean opposites, to put them together to almost mean the same thing. So what I'm saying here is that in this world, in this fantasy world, again allegorical to this world too, there is people that are fully convinced they're free, but they're imprisoned, is basically what I'm trying to say here. That this idea is fabricated that people are free whenever they're imprisoned. They might have a lot of luxuries or pleasures, but they're still imprisoned, is basically the idea I'm trying to get at here. And this is what the character is observing in the world, basically literally, even himself. And then he goes on to describe it: a cage of fallacies within and without me. Within and without basically means inside and outside of me. And basically he's saying that like fallacies are basically false ideas. They're like, fallacies are like flaws in logic and thinking that, that they a lot of times sound like they make sense, but they don't. And they literally have no logical ground to stand on, like on a fundamental basis of what logic is. They have no ground to stand on that. They're fallacious fallacies. They're false. And a lot of times fallacies are hard to see, they're just flaws in logic and in reasoning and in thinking. So what he's saying is a cage of fallacies within and without me. So there's flawed reasoning and logic inside and outside of me. It's basically what he's saying there. And then kind of repetitive, saying stuck in a state of siege a lot in this song. He says that line over again. I'm stuck in a state of siege, demons surrounding. Just again describing what it feels like where he is, literally, and on like another level of like, he in this world, he's literally surrounded by demons, and he's a thrall to the demons. And if you don't know what that means, it basically means servant. And yeah, so like inside and outside of him, this is like reflecting the world outside of him as well as inside of him. This trying to describe like both. And then keeps going on. Reasoning, keeping faith under lock and key. Told that I'm free as long as I stay under their guillotine. So I'll kind of stop there. Although maybe I'll just show the rest of the line. Bend the knee to tyranny, saying that as a question. He says, no, I'll usher in the end of your hell bringing. So we'll kind of go into that. First line, reasoning, keeping faith under lock and key. Describing, again, what this state of siege feels like. It's like two sides of himself. One wants to stay and one wants to go. Basically, like one wants to be free from this thraldom that he's under, and one side wants to stay under it because it's secure, it's safe. Although there's a lot of like, torment and everything under as being a thrall, as being a slave, basically. There's security in that, but there's also there's a feeling of security, but it's false security. But this is his reasoning, and this is a lot of our reasoning nowadays. It's like it seems more reasonable to stay under like an employer or something like that, for example, rather than pursue your calling and build something of your own that provides income for you or whatever. This is just like, for reflecting this sort of my life right now as like having to be under employers for such a long time. By definition, it's a form of servanthood. It's a form of thraldom. You're obligated to give your time and work for these employers, and you get something in return for that. Obviously, you get security, you get safety, you get income, all these things. And I'm not trying to bash or say anything wrong with that. Okay, this is the story of the character, and this is sort of my story as well. um, reasoning, keeping something like that I feel called to do, keeping me from doing what I want to do, from pursuing something I believe I should be doing. So that's what it means, like reasoning, keeping faith under lock and key. It seems more reasonable to stay under a master or employer, whatever words you want to use. They all mean the same thing today. Or to take a leap of faith and do something I've never done before in order to get somewhere I've never been. Answering this call to do something, something I'm very passionate about, something I feel called to do, as a means of, serving those around me in the best way possible. Like, I believe we're called to serve the world around us. And in order for me to best do that, it is right here in this studio making music. That's what I'm best at. So that's what I'm saying here. I'm feeling called to step out in faith, but reasoning is keeping it under lock and key. Is what I'm saying here. And then told that I'm free as long as I stay under the guillotine. That's, the second you step out or you do something wrong or whatever, it's different in different situations. All right, I understand that. What I'm essentially saying here is we're told we're secure under these, employers or whatever, we're told that, this is more secure way to live and things like that. You get all the benefits, all the security, all the income, all the things you don't need, basically. Well, that's my belief anyway. Told that I'm free as long as I stay under the guillotine. So that's really just what I'm saying is okay, these are the bounds you have to stay within if you want to be free. Stay under this guillotine. And that's how I see it, and that's how I'm describing it, okay? But this is also happening in the stories, like not a literal guillotine, but it basically is saying like the second you try to break the contract in a sense, they're going to drop the guillotine on your neck, not literally, but like in a sense, okay? That might sound exaggerated and ridiculous, but that's metal. It's extreme realism to the point where you're exaggerating something to make a point of, how important it is to you, or, to just get people to see it. Sometimes you just exaggerate things to make a point. And, that's what like poetry does and stuff like that. It's like exaggerated descriptions of something to make it more than it is, because we need to see it as, more in a good way or a bad way, depending on what it is, And then he asks the question, bend the knee to tyranny, basically like vow myself to tyrannical rule. And he's saying, no, I'll usher in the end of your hell bringing. And hell bringing is referring to basically what happens in this story and in this world early on. Like, I'm writing a first book. This is gonna be like a series of books. But the hell bringing is basically when the demons were allowed into this world, this fantasy world, and allowed to take over. But it's also representative of like an inner hell bringing, like something inside that's corrupting something good, something that was good, something that is good. But he's saying like, I'm not going to bend the knee to tyrannical rule. I'll usher in the end of it, basically. That's like what he's vowing to do here. He's like saying, I'm going to end it. Because, he's kind of having this realization of things, of the world and everything. Then goes on to say, I keep saying he as if it's like the character saying this, which it is. Like in the story, it's the character saying this, and it's, this song is written from the perspective of the character, but it's really like I'm the one who says it in the song, obviously. Confusion and loss of meaning in an age of intentional obscurity. So what I'm saying there is, just describing the world around me, there's confusion and loss of meaning, and it's as a result of intentional obscurity. It's as a result of intentionally intentional ignorance, you know. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. So it's like it's an intentional ignorance because people don't want to face, you know, things that will challenge them, that will, go against their personal beliefs in life, that will challenge their personal opinions and views in life. It's an intentional turning away from the truth and walking towards a lie. Then I ask another question: live my best life while secured by a cage. And then describes what that basically is like. It's like a king feasting while his city is under siege and his people are so hungry that they're eating their younglings. That's actually a reference to when, I think it was Jerusalem that was under siege at some point, and there's mentions there of these people having to eat their younglings. I'm saying that because I don't want to get too graphic here and get blocked on Facebook. I'm saying the word youngling there to obviously it still means the same thing, but that happens in the story. Like, people are so starving that they resort to cannibalism, and it's crazy. There's not really anything about a king feasting while his people are starving, but I'm saying that's what it's like. And kind of referring to like the live your best life movement and stuff like that, like and I'm trying to bring to light that living your best life in the way that they describe it, this movement, those people, if you know what I'm talking about, like Live My Best Life, it's like a book, and by a popular like pastor, like what's the word, charismatic movement, that kind of thing, like all about like living your best life, and God created you to live your best life and all this things. Like, not that God didn't create you to live a happy and fulfilling life, but the focus shouldn't be living your best life, well, maybe it should just be redefined. Living your best life is becoming your name. It's becoming who you are, and that's not always easy. That doesn't always entail like what this idea of living your best life entails, which is like just always prospering, never struggling, things like that. That doesn't build character. That doesn't build anything. Living your best life while secured by a cage. Like, what I'm saying here is all the pleasures and different things, that's a cage. When it's an obsession, that's your goal in life, is to just have those things, and it's not to be, a servant to those around you. It's not to build a better world around you. It's simply to build a better life for yourself. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the over obsession and focus of living your best life, and when that means just pursuing vain things, that's a cage. So that's what I'm saying there. And like a king feasting under siege, it's like someone who has a lot. And we've seen this in the world many times, where people have so much, famous actors, stuff like that, they all have so much and they take their own life. It's self-destructive because there's no meaning in it. No meaning in a life just serving yourself. You lose yourself. So what's the point? The whole goal is to preserve yourself, but in the end, you destroy it. You destroy yourself whenever that is the obsession and goal of your life. Then goes on to describe, basically in the story, the main character is an architect serving the devil, who is like the leader of these demons that took over his world. And he's describing this place he built for the devil. All right, so we'll just get into it. A feast of worms and snakes, a gathering place for harlots and priests, and at its center I stand as its builder, the architect, the author of my fetters. So it's metaphorical, but it's also, describing something that actually happened in the story too. So he's describing like this, this feast of worms and snakes. It's just kind of something like putrid and gross to describe what the kind of world that is around him as a result of what he's done, in a sense, I guess. Just a quick note. Some of these things I write, I have no idea where it comes from, and sometimes I have a hard time explaining it because I didn't know where it comes from, but it sounded cool. It sounded epic, and it also fits, sort of. It's just like, but then, a gathering place for harlots and priests, that's referring to like demon priests, okay? And harlots, I don't really need to explain that, but it's like, it's just describing this putrid, disgusting, wicked, twisted place, and that he stands at the center of it, the builder, the architect, the author of it. And he also describes them as fetters. So he's describing again like what it said in the beginning, within and without me. It's inside and outside of me. Like it's something that is metaphorical to what's happening in himself as well as outside of him. That might be confusing, but I thought that was a cool concept, so that's what I'm going for. Then he goes into this next line: conflicting memories, a genealogy of slavery. The fire inside tells a different story. The history weavers lie. So he's just describing like conflicting memories because this character was raised in a sort of he was raised in a free sense, like he was not under this tyrannical, demonic rule. Again, people don't mistake me. This is like a fantasy allegory, okay? This is a fantasy, but it's also things I've observed in the world. But, the goal is to write a fantasy allegory, okay? And also to share similar thoughts that I've had in my mind, looking at the world around me. So, when he says conflicting memories, there's different things conflicting because he's essentially been raised with two worldviews. This is, the result of when you allow your children to be raised with two different worldviews. This is, I'm not going to get into it, but when your child is basically being taught from two different perspectives, two different worldviews, this is what's going to happen. Like conflicting memories, like which history was right, and things like that. And then, he's reflecting back on like how his people have basically been under this thraldom, serving these demons for as long as he can remember. Saying a genealogy of slavery, that's what he's describing. But he's saying the fire inside tells a different story, and that the history weavers lie. And what he's saying here is, in the story, I'm going to probably refer to it several times in future songs and stuff like that. The history weavers, there was one true history weaver, but there's also a lot of false history weavers that are demons, and they weave the history in such a way to suppress the people and to make them forget their heritage, their powerful heritage of, that they come from. They come from a strong, very powerful people with this power inside of them, capable of that if they united, they could destroy this demonic control. This is what he's saying. He's saying there's something in me that tells a different story. There's something in me that doesn't agree with this story, and there's something in me that's telling me a different story. And in the story, he's on this journey of discovering his people's history, and he finds scrolls and stuff like that hidden, and he studies them, stuff like that, and he finds out eventually the true history of his people. And that'll be kind of shared in the beginning of the book. Then we go into the next line, next couple of lines. This is kind of like the chorus part. I only do it once, but then he goes into this. This is my state. I am beset by enemies. I'm surrounded. I'm under siege. He's describing how he feels. A burning rage, taught to suppress it, bursting at the seams. I can no longer bear this. So it's summing up like what the song is about, and his, the state of his being in a physical sense, and in a what's the word, like in a spiritual sense,